Spike found himself on the battlefield once again. This time, it wasn't a memory, it was happening all over. The Nightmare Tyrant's armor weighed heavy on his shoulders, and the Blood Shard's power coursed through his veins. His sword, Nightmare, was heavy and it felt good to hold in his hands. It was a perfect weapon for fighting in the Nightmare realm. The battlefield was eerily silent. He looked around desperately, hoping to find his allies, but he saw none. He looked to the skies, hoping to see the Night Fury, but no, it was completely absent.
Look who's returned,
Came the calm voice of the Nightmare Tyrant.
I'm sure you've come to slay me this time. I admire that, I really do. But tonight, we're going to have a little talk, you and I.
What's going on here?
Spike asked.
You entered my domain in more ways than one.
The Nightmare Tyrant explained.
You didn't just cross over from the real world into my domain. You crossed into my mind. Now the power of the Nightmare Tyrant is vast. It's almost infinite, but it has its limits. I can only take what I can handle. And that's why your sword is so heavy. It's because your soul is trapped inside it. I've let you keep it because you impressed me. But you must prove yourself worthy of wielding such power. Prove yourself worthy to keep your soul inside my sword.
What the heck are you talking about?
Spike asked.
You must defend your own life against my minions. You must slay them all.
I don't know how!
The Nightmare Tyrant warped and twisted, taking on the appearance of Fluttershy.
And yet you must.
Look, I'm not a fighter. I don't have any skill in combat.
Liar.
The Nightmare Tyrant accused, as skeletal hands burst from the bloody battlefield.
You killed the unicorns. You slew the griffin. You slew the guards in my dungeon. You slew countless others. You're a murderer and a coward, but I see potential in you. I see why my power can't contain itself in the sword in your hands. I see why it's so heavy. You have the makings of a great warrior. So great a warrior that I'll make you a deal, warrior. Defend your life against my horde of minions. Slay them all. Prove that you are worthy to hold my sword.
But...
Spike pleaded.
Make your choice, coward.
The Nightmare Tyrant said. Applejack was dead. She'd been beaten to death by the orb of the Nightmare King. Her body lay cold and still on the forest floor. No one would mourn her passing. Not the stallions who'd once been her best friends. Not her friends at all. Not even the mules who'd shared her every task, her every hardship. She stood over her corpse and wept.
I feel sick.
The words came out in a sob.
I feel sick to my stomach.
Amethyst said nothing, but she patted Applejack's flank.
What do we do now, ma'am? You'll be buried.
She said.
How? We can't dig a proper grave.
Applejack asked.
Nobody even knows I died here.
What would you give for a second chance?
Amethyst asked.
What?
If you had a chance to save your friends, would you take it?
I don't know.
Would you?
Yes.
You'll forget almost everything. But I can bring you back to life.
No!
Applejack cried.
I can't do that! You know what would happen! I'd die a second time! I won't live that way!
Amethyst nodded.
I understand.
She reached into her cloak and pulled out a jar. It was covered with cobwebs and dirt, and it took her 2 tries to open it. Once it was open, she tipped it over and dirt spilled out.
Do what you have to, but I have a jar that'll bring you back.
A jar of what?
Applejack asked.
Don't even ask.
But you can bring me back, right?
Yes.
Amethyst said.
I fear your friends will need all the help they can get, especially Fluttershy.
What are you talking about?
She's caught the eye of the Nightmare King.
Amethyst explained. Applejack nodded.
We were afraid of that, but we rescued her!
She'll never make it out of Equestria in her current state.
Amethyst said.
Even with your help, she will not survive.
Applejack stared at the jar in her hands.
I'll forget everything?
Everything!
Even Ponyville?
Even Ponyville.
What about the mules?
The mules.
Amethyst said softly.
The mules.
Applejack nodded. She couldn't speak. All she could do was stare at the jar in her hands.
It'll hurt.
Amethyst said.
You'll feel pain for days.
What else is there?
Amethyst smiled.
There's an apple tree in your orchard.
There are many...
Applejack said.
It's an apple orchard.
Your favorite kind of apple tree.
Amethyst said. She produced an apple from her cloak and squeezed it into the jar.
Hold this.
But I can't reach the apples on the branches.
Applejack cried.
Just hold the apple.
Applejack took the jar. Her eyes were wide.
What? What will happen?
The Nightmare Realm will be purged.
Amethyst said.
Just stay the path.
How?
Just stay the path.
Amethyst leaned forward and pressed her lips against Applejack's. She whispered a short chant and her lips were sealed.
Goodbye, Applejack.
Roxy had been given a special task, an order from Oz himself. She had to escort his daughter, Jolyne, out of the Emerald City. The Nightmare Tyrant was coming, and the Emerald King's only concern was for his daughter. So, while the rest of Oz's army, a well-equipped army of 50,000 warriors, had been called back to the Palace of Oz, only a small squad of 7 wicked witches and 1 hag had been left in the city to look after the wizard's daughter, and themselves. Roxy had a lot to look forward to. Sleeping in, sleeping in, sleeping in. None of them knew that she'd sold her soul to the Nightmare Tyrant, and that she was already lost. She would never see her home again. They had made a terrible mistake. They had sent a child to do a grown woman's job. Roxy was meant to protect Jolyne, but she hadn't protected her. She had failed. She had let the Nightmare Tyrant into the city. She hadn't even been scared. She hadn't been afraid. She should have been. She should have been scared. And then she should have fought back. And then she should have died. Instead, she was here. She was in the prison of the lost, where she belonged. There was no laughter, no joy, no smiles, and no happy ending. Pinkie Pie's nightmare wasn't pretty. She'd been right. She had no friends. Not truly. Only the Black Fang, and they had deserted her. The circus had left town. She'd been found and dragged back to the farm, and then the nightmare had begun.
Where is everyone?
Pinkie pleaded.
Where are my friends?
They've gone.
The farmer's wife said.
I'm sorry, dearie. You'll have to be alone for a while. It was terrible what happened to you.
I had friends.
Oh, honey, they weren't real friends. They were just kids having fun.
No!
Pinkie said, her eyes filling with tears.
I had friends. Where are they?
We're your only friends.
A deep voice said. Pinkie's eyes darted to the doorway. Standing there, her pale face ghostly in the moonlight, was her friend Jaden.
What did you do to her?
Jaden demanded. The farmer's wife hung her head.
She had nightmares. We thought it would stop if you left. It's been weeks and she's still screaming.
We know what the circus did.
Jaden said, her eyes flashing.
We saw it. They hurt you and you won't stop screaming.
You promised!
Pinkie screamed.
Where were you when I needed you most?
Jaden asked.
Why did you let them come for me?
I didn't know.
Pinkie said.
I've been so busy.
You were supposed to watch out for me. You were my friend.
I'm sorry.
Pinkie said, starting to cry.
We can fix you.
Jaden said.
The blood-headed one can fix you.
What?
She can make you better. She can make you happy.
No!
Pinkie screamed.
I don't want her to touch me.
You must be afraid.
I'm not afraid.
I'll make you happy again.
No!
Pinkie said, backing away.
No, don't come any closer, please. I'm scared.
Pinkie Pie ran out of the room and up the stairs. She ran into darkness. Jolyne had been traded to the Nightmare Tyrant by the traitor Roxanne. Though she was just a baby at the time, she'd grown into a powerful fighter and skilled water adept. She now served the Nightmare Tyrant as a bodyguard, standing at his side in the shadows, watching the world go by as he unleashed his terror upon it. The Nightmare Tyrant seemed to prefer to have Jolyne near him at all times. He was obsessed with her, and she soon learned to never go anywhere without her beloved Dark Lord nearby. Night after night she stood by him, protecting him from all harm, for she was his greatest weapon. If anyone dared to challenge him, Jolyne would kill them without a second thought, using all her fury and her unearthly strength to obliterate her enemy. She would do anything to ensure that the Nightmare Tyrant lived forever. Yet she often wondered if he would live forever. She had heard rumors that he had once been immortal, a simple cat. She wondered if the Nightmare Tyrant might one day be gone, replaced by a human being. But that was a thought that would only distract her from her duty. The Nightmare Tyrant was always her master. He was her lord and king, and he was eternal. And so she lived in the shadows, hidden in the darkness, as the world went mad around her.
I really think you ought to be more careful,
Garnet told Zecora as they hacked their way through the twisted foliage of the Nightmare Realm.
I know I wouldn't be happy if my garden were being hacked up like this.
Do you hear me complaining?
Zecora snapped.
I never complain about my job. Now stop babbling and let me concentrate, and maybe we'll both live to see another day.
Garnet had no idea how Zecora did it, but she seemed to manage the Nightmare Realm with an ease that Garnet couldn't possibly hope to emulate. While she was a powerful witch, she wasn't a nightmare witch like Zuzu or a fire witch like Garnet, who had grown up in the real world and had been trained to control their realm since childhood.
If you think it's so important, why don't you take over?
Garnet asked.
You're a better witch than I am.
I have better allies.
Zecora said.
Besides, someone's got to keep an eye on you so that you don't get us all killed.
How do you know I won't just take you with me when I steal the throne?
Zecora chuckled.
You think I'm gonna let you become the Nightmare Tyrant all on your own? I'm not going anywhere, kiddo.
Fine.
Garnet said.
But if you get on my nerves, I'm throwing you over the... Well, you get the drift?
Got it.
Zecora said.
Now let's finish this weeds.
It was a lot harder than it looked, especially since Zecora insisted on carrying the root-cutting tool herself, leaving Garnet to focus all her attention on hacking away at the thick plants. Eventually, though, they managed to get within eyesight of Castle Oblivion.
There.
Zecora said, stopping and pointing.
See that tower? That's where the Nightmare Tyrant is keeping our baby prince.
I can't even see it from here.
It's right there on the left side, see it?
Garnet squinted. She couldn't see anything but the tall spires of the castle.
Well,
What am I looking for?
what do you think?
Zecora asked.
A big tower with a cage in it.
Oh, I see it.
Exactly.
Zecora said.
Now let's get a running start and go get him.
But how are we going to get in?
Simple.
Zecora said.
You're a shapeshifter. I'm a witch. Together we're a shapeshifting witch and a shapeshifter.
Do you think you can fly?
Of course not.
So how are we getting in?
Zecora grinned.
We're
jumping.
exactly.
Zecora said.
No offense, Zecora, but I don't think you're taking me all the way to the tower.
It's the only way.
We'll never make it.
Garnet said.
Stop being such a fraidy cat.
Zecora said.
I'll go first, and you'll go second. Then we'll just shift back to our regular forms and climb up to the castle on the next wave of guards.
I still don't like this.
Look, if you don't want to go, you don't have to.
Zecora said.
I'm doing this whether you come or not.
I'm coming.
Garnet said.
I just hope you know what you're doing.
Zecora patted her on the shoulder.
So do I.
What about our stuff?
Don't worry.
Zecora said.
I've got everything we need.
Garnet looked at her in disbelief.
You do?
Zecora nodded.
I've got a whole bag of tricks that I've been saving for just this occasion.
Garnet didn't like the sound of that. Then the two of them jumped. What Zecora hadn't planned for, however, was a flying nightmare beast that came right at them. It was a lot bigger and meaner than she was, and it managed to knock her out of the sky before biting off Garnet's head.
Shit!
Zecora cried.
I forgot about the beast.
She plummeted to the ground, landing with a sickening thud. Garnet tumbled out of her grip, and the beast snatched her up and swallowed her whole.
No!
Zecora cried.
Garnet, no!
Her sister was gone. Twilight Sparkle opened her eyes and found that she had become Nightmare Moon. The Nightmare King laughed as he filled her with the power of nightmares. She would be his greatest weapon, used to destroy those who stood against him. She saw that there was no escape, and so she would do whatever was required of her. She made her choice.
Nightmare Moon, you must become Nightmare Moon.
The Nightmare King said.
You must use your powers to spread nightmares to every corner of this world.
I understand.
She said.
Do you?
He asked.
I do.
She said.
Then let's begin.
Nightmare Moon's eyes began to glow. She looked up at her father, and he touched her, causing her to smile. She flew into the sky, laughing and approaching the castle of the sun and moon goddesses. There were two entrances, one facing the sun, one facing the moon. She chose the one facing the moon. She arrived at the entrance and found that it was sealed shut with a stone.
How can that be?
She cried.
How can the entrance to the castle of the moon goddess be closed?
Then she began to cry.
You are not the rightful ruler of Equestria.
Nightmare Moon turned to find the goddess of the sun staring her down.
You have no right to be here.
The sun goddess said.
Why did you think you could challenge the goddess of the moon and the moon itself?
I don't care.
Nightmare Moon said.
I'm going to take my place as ruler of Equestria. I'll open the door myself.
You don't understand.
The sun goddess said.
You can't defeat me. I'm the sun. You're just a little nightmare.
I'm a Nightmare Moon.
Nightmare Moon said, and the sun goddess backed away in fear.
I'm going to open the door.
And with that, she charged at the sun goddess and struck at her with her nightmare blade.
No!
The sun goddess cried.
I command you to stop!
But it was too late. The Nightmare Queen had struck the sun goddess and sliced open her chest. Then she struck again, and the sun goddess fell to the ground. The sun was now extinguished.
The sun has fallen. The day has ended.
The Nightmare King said. Nightmare Moon laughed.
This is Nightfall.
She said proudly.
Nightmare has come to Equestria, and I have become Nightmare Moon.
She opened the door to the moon, and the stars came streaming in. She felt powerful and in control for the first time in her life.
Come to me, my dearest moon.
Cammy looked around her room. There was no one else there. She could tell that this was true by the silence. She also knew that this was true because she could see through the curtains. There was no sun and no moon, just black. She could see everything and she knew she was alone. This was the dream. This was the nightmare.
Hello.
A voice said, but Cammy couldn't see who it was.
I'm here to help you.
She knew this voice. It was the voice of her friend, Chun-Li. Chun-Li was real, and she was here to help. And that meant something.
Now listen.
The voice continued.
I've been watching you suffer. Watching you go through hell. And I've decided to help you.
There was a pause. Cammy waited nervously, fearfully. The dream began to fade. She wanted it to come back, but she didn't want to miss the ending.
I'm going to take your place.
The voice said.
I'm going to be you. I'm going to go through the same hell you went through. But when I beat the bad guy, I'm going to wake up. And you will too.
It'll work?
Cammy asked, hopeful.
Yes, I'm going to make it work.
The voice said.
I knew you'd come.
Cammy said.
I could feel it. I was so lost when you died.
We're going to make you a hero.
The voice said.
We're going to show the world that you didn't die.
I love you.
Cammy said.
I love you so much.
I love you too, Cammy.
The voice said.
Now you're going to close your eyes. And you're going to forget everything. You're going to forget about your life, your friends, everything.
I want to stay here with you.
When you wake up, we'll be together.
The voice assured her.
Just trust me.
Cammy closed her eyes. She let out a long, slow breath, and then she let the darkness take her. She felt the ground under her feet. She smelled the dirt. She heard the wind. And then there was nothing.
Wake up, Cammy!
The voice said.
I'm awake,
Cammy said. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the living room with Judy's ghost and all the others. Her friends all looked as if they'd just woken from their own dreams. To Cammy's surprise, she felt a hand grasp hers. She looked to her left and saw Chun-Li.
You You're alive.
Cammy said.
I know.
Chun-Li said.
I saw you die, but I saw you too in the dream. I saw you save the city. I saw you defeat the game.
But I saw you die.
Cammy said.
How did you see me die?
We traded places and traded back.
Chun-Li said.
It's imprecise, but we both managed to survive that battle.
I'm sorry I wasn't able to save you.
Cammy said.
Hey, you couldn't have saved me.
Chun-Li said.
It was me or you. You made the right call.
I think you're wrong.
Cammy said.
About what?
About me being a hero. I failed.
No, you didn't.
Chun-Li said.
You did your best. You have to believe that you did your best.
That's not what your teacher thinks.
Cammy said.
She's not your teacher anymore.
Chun-Li said.
She's just my friend. And I think you know that she's a lot smarter than what you think she is.
How do you know what I think?
Cammy asked.
Because I was you, silly!
Chun-Li said with a smile.
But now we're both here, and I'll help you face this new challenge. We'll save the world. Together.
Cammy smiled back at Chun-Li. She smiled at her friends. She smiled at the city. She finally felt as if she was home. So, like I alluded to last time, this chapter was written a little bit differently than the others. Normally I just have one narrative for the whole chapter, like one AI dungeon adventure that represents the whole chapter. This time I did each one as a separate adventure so they'd be less connected. I didn't want the AI dungeon to like get confused and plug elements from one character's nightmare into another's. That's why they're kind of divergent in their like paths. How a couple of them don't even have like a scene, they're just kind of like a summary of like a time or a feeling. But I think that that works for what we're going for here, because you know, not all dreams are the same. Some characters' dreams are like memories of past events, or some of them are just kind of a general feeling of regret. I tried to give each nightmare like a starting point that I felt was referenced at some point in their pasts or what we knew about them. Of course, a couple of these characters haven't been in Nightfall very long, or at least like in the story. So like Zecora, we don't really know anything about what Zecora had going on before she came into the story, other than there was like a little bit of a mention of her having her own battle with the Nightmare Tyrant. And so I think what we saw with Garnet was like a prelude to that. Similarly, Spike like was recalled back to when he was in service of the Nightmare Tyrant. Roxy and Jolyne, both of theirs kind of referenced their relationship, which has been alluded to several times in the story. I don't want to go too in-depth in explaining all of them, but I think there were some interesting things there. Pinkie Pie's was the weirdest because I liked how it started with the kind of flat statements, and then when it said a farmer's wife, I was like, oh, well, that could just be her mom from the show. That makes sense. But then it introduced a friend character. At the time, I was still using the Uberduck voices, so I just chose somebody I knew on Uberduck, which was Jaden Animations, who I thought would be like kind of a fun character to be Pinkie's friend, who also ended up, I guess we got to reveal that Jaden in the story is a vampire now and part of the Bloodheaded One's army, so we'll see if that comes back up. A lot of different things kind of revealed here. Of course, due to the nature of it being like the nightmares of our main characters, this one does kind of come across a little bit darker than maybe most Nightfall chapters, but I think it all kind of comes together in an interesting way. Chun-Li coming back to life was like a weird surprise. When it first introduced Cammy's friend, I was like, oh, well, obviously, I felt like that should be Chun-Li, because I just remember those characters always getting partnered up in Street Fighter, what I've played of it. But then it introduced that she's actually dead. And then later it was like, oh no, but she can come back to life through the dream. And we'll see the fallout of that in the next chapter, because we'll pick up right where we left off next time. And hopefully y'all will join me then. If you want to make sure you don't miss it, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell. I hear that does something. And I'll hopefully see you then. In the meantime, if you happen to miss the previous episode, here's a little clip of what you missed.
Are you coming?
Pinkie called.
I can't.
Cammy said.
What?
Pinkie asked.
I don't know if I can be brave enough.
Bullcrap.
Pinkie said.
You can do anything.
I don't know.
Yes, you do.
Pinkie said.
Now come on.
Okay.
Cammy said.
I'm coming.
She stepped through the doorway.
Don't be scared.
Pinkie said.
I'll predict you.
Oh, great.